I always like this painting. Sophomores, you should be watching this. If you're a junior, don't watch this. I always like this painting because it's there's lots of funny expressions. If you look at the guys on the left, they're like, "That horse is huge." As Washington's horse clearly is superior to all the other horses. Like, look at me, I got George Washington. Anyways, we're looking at the Whiskey Rebellion today. There was a rebellion over whiskey, which sounds odd, but it is true. So where do we get enough people angry about whiskey that they're going to rebel? Well, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is the spot. And they all blame good old Alexander Hamilton. One way that he wants to raise money, we've already looked at a bunch of ways, but he says, well, we should probably tax something in the United States. So whiskey becomes the first good in the United States that is taxed by the U.S. government. And for the most part, Hamilton's thinking that people would be able to afford this. He estimated it would cost about $1.50 a year, which is about 25 cents per gallon. People drank back in 1790 approximately, what are we thinking, 6 gallons a year. So that's the average. Certainly a lot of whiskey, but it's used fairly regularly. This is a list of expenses for a funeral for a man named David Porter in Hartford, Connecticut. 1678. So for the funeral, the expenses included a shilling to buy a pint of liquor for this man. He drowned, so that people dived for him. People that brought him home, they also gave liquor to. For the people that were investigating what happened, they gave wine and cider to them. And for the funeral itself, there was 8 gallons and 3 quarts of wine and a barrel of cider. And, of course, there was a coffin. The alcohol was far more expensive than the coffin itself. So whiskey was used in funerals. It was used in weddings. It was used virtually everywhere. And whiskey itself comes in jugs like this, but also in Pennsylvania, mostly in the far reaches where it's farmers and very rural areas, there isn't a lot of currency out there. So farmers use whiskey as a way to buy goods. They might make whiskey and they exchange it for blankets or other items. In reality, people in Pennsylvania out here, they are only making about $20 a year. So their tax, since they use whiskey more often, $6 was estimated that of their $20 income, $6 would be taken out just for this whiskey tax. So people in Pennsylvania were upset. But a lot of people supported this tax. It's known as a sin tax. We have sin taxes today. And sin taxes are taxes on goods which are seen by society as not good things, like tobacco or alcohol, gambling. So it's a way to discourage people from participating in behaviors not seen as good for society. However, some people don't like it. And people don't like it because, and contributing to the fact that we have some political parties that are arising. We have Hamilton, we have Jefferson, we've talked about them a whole lot, and since they have such conflicting ideas, around each one of those men, a political party arises. So Alexander Hamilton, seen here, he starts the Federalist Party. And the Federalist Party pretty much follows his ideas of how the government, how the country should run. On the other hand, Thomas Jefferson begins the Republican Party. So both these men have various politicians and other people that are supporting them, and with the whiskey tax coming in, both parties weigh in on it. Hamilton's party supports the tax, whereas Jefferson's party, the Republicans, do not support it. However, the tax goes into place as Jefferson actually made a deal with Hamilton not to speak up against it, namely because Hamilton agreed to move the capital to Washington, D.C. So, we have this tax, and the people that are most upset, as I said, are these farmers in Pennsylvania. So farmers in Pennsylvania, they start mobs. They start a rebellion. So they attack tax collectors. This is them tarring and feathering a tax collector in western Pennsylvania. Tarring and feathering, if you don't know, is you essentially pour hot tar on a person and then put feathers on them to mock them. It is fairly unpleasant, as this picture, it's actually a photograph of a man that was tarred and feathered. As you can see by his face, he is not very happy. So tarring and feathering is happening. People are lifting up liberty poles. So liberty poles are essentially just a big pole, and on it you have flags and slogans. And people are, in this area of the country, very upset about these taxes. So for a couple of years, the tax is collected, or at least attempted to be collected. But in 1794, more tax collectors are attacked, and soldiers that were coming to protect those tax collectors were also attacked. So George Washington raises an army, and he raises 13,500 troops. This is, once again, George Washington. He raises over 13,000 troops and personally leads them into Pennsylvania, which is pretty awesome that the President of the United States is leading an army. With such a show of strength, the government is able to suppress this rebellion, and they put some of the people in charge of the rebellion on trial. And thus, the Whiskey Rebellion comes to an end. It's not only problems in the United States. There's also issues with our partners, our countries overseas. Namely, France and England are bickering again, and once again, they're coming to blows and fights. So, we have Louis XVI. Louis XVI is right here. He loved to sing songs, or at least in my mind he did. And his favorite song was the song about your body parts. So, he really enjoys the fact that the head bone is attached to the shoulder bone. So Louis XVI is running France. He's the man that helps the United States defeat England during the Revolutionary War. So Louis XVI, however, is not very popular in France itself. France is trying to make changes. There's a lot of economic issues, and eventually he is, an enemy of the state. He tries to escape the country, and in fact, his little song about the head bone attaching to the shoulder bone, after the country gets hold of him and puts him on trial, it's no longer true. He gets guillotined. The guillotine is a big machine that chops your head off, and that's exactly what happened. And he was very sad, or we presume he was. And thus the French Revolution occurs. France rises up against the king, chops his head off, and takes over. While this is seemingly a good thing, the French Revolution also has the Reign of Terror, where over 2,000 Frenchmen are also beheaded. So it's a pretty violent revolution, not very civilized. And while Hamilton is shocked and appalled by this, Jefferson is all on board with his French friends. But there's a problem. France wants to attack English ships from American cities. So France wants to put their ships in American cities and attack those English ships. The problem is that England is still the best trading partner with America, so Hamilton is saying, no, we can't attack our friends, or if they're not our friends, at least they're our financial friends. So there becomes a big issue. So what happens is there's this debate over who the United States should support. Should it be the French or the English? And George Washington, having seen what happens in war, he decides to do neither. He wants to keep the country neutral. And while being neutral is certainly a good thing, or so you think, the British don't particularly care about the United States being neutral at all. What they end up doing is impressing American sailors. What they do is they show up, find an American ship, they seize American sailors off of the ship, and take them and force them to serve in their own navy. Why they do this? Well, the English have been at war for a really long time, and they need more sailors. And to get more sailors, instead of training for years and years and years, they simply just steal American sailors. So this is called impressment. What they're also doing is just, once they seize an American ship, and they take all the goods off of it. So they're essentially laying a great terrorist war against the United States in order to support their war against France. No good. People in America are upset by all of this. Their trade is being decimated. Sailors being seized. Nothing good is happening. So this man, John Jay, goes and tries to make a treaty with England. While he doesn't get to stop the British from kidnapping sailors or seizing ships, he does get an agreement that the British will leave forts in the Ohio Valley. And they're going to pay for some goods that were taken. So, long video. Hopefully you haven't passed out from gross heads being chopped off. And I will see you when I see you next. Fare thee well.